Morning all, let's have a look at another amazing game of Hikaru Nakamura against a computer, Crafty computer, ICC Blitz 2007. Crafty playing white, kicked off with knight c3. Nakamura adopted g6, fianchetto, and now e6, and this setup could be described as the hippopotamus. Black aims to often fianchetto both bishops. And one of the advantages of the hippo, it can be underestimated because black still has options for d5 and e5 in the centre at the right time. And with white playing now d5, Nakamura takes the opportunity to play e5 here. And we have what seems to be a kind of King's Indian style position now. He starts advancing his pawns on the king side. And it's a very locked in position, an ideal type of closed position that you want to get against computers. Especially computers which are not so powerful as today's engines, had some real problems playing in these closed positions. So g4, and it's signalling that there's quite some dangers now for white's king side here. Queen d3, a6. So black might even be prepared for b5, keeps white out of the b5 square. a4, knight d7. You'll notice that white hasn't really got the pawn breaks here. It's black that has the option of g takes or g3. Knight f6, b4. Very closed position, which doesn't suit the brute force calculation of computers. And then we see g3, a pawn sacrifice. What is going on here? Well, in the King's Indian, this type of pawn sacrifice lights up the dark squares. In particular, the f4 square will be very useful for black. So fg, bishop takes, now h4. This f4 square can be marked out much more powerfully now, potentially with things like knight h5. But the computer gets desperate. It sacrifices the bishop here. It doesn't like the look of, say, bishop h2, maybe knight h5, or there might be even something more dangerous. It sacrifices the bishop. So, Naka takes, g3, the knight goes back. And now, rook h2, there's a bit of danger on the h file which needs to be parried. White's doubling now on the h file. Now this just leads to an exchange of rooks for the moment. And then Naka is back looking at that f4 square. Queen e8, b5 covering the a4 pawn just in case. So a5, knight e7. Now this knight is taken. And now queen g6. Now a piece up. It's a bit tricky though. How does black actually make progress? Naka exchanges off the rooks and now starts a long manoeuvring game. This knight coming on c5 is very nice, locking down white defensively to the a4 pawn over here. Now the queen infiltration is very useful as well, pinning that knight. So white's getting more and more tied down. This check here, queen c1, a dangerous infiltration. Bishop d2, so c3 looks like a big problem. g4, c3 is taken, and the queen's come off. So now it looks as though it's starting to be a bit futile for white. White protects the a4 pawn again. The bishop comes back, check. Knight e7. The knight retreats for a moment. Now this f4 square is finally ready to be used, but no, actually the f3 is more important now. The f3 and a4 pawns are just very difficult to defend, both of them. So the computer takes, and now the king can maybe use the f4 square, which it does now. And now the knight can help the king by coming to g5. But first the bishop goes into the position. Now knight g5, and the computer lets go of the f3 pawn with king g1. It will be getting into an almost zugzwang position now after king g2. Bishop e1, or the king could just infiltrate, but this is getting very difficult. But after bishop e1, the bishop could reroute, and then the king could infiltrate. Okay, so the computer gave up on the f3 pawn, and here, in true Nakamura style, he does something which is not so naughty when playing against a computer. They haven't got human emotions. And normally the player with white would resign at this point when it's helpless, or much earlier than this. But the computer plays on, and it allows Naka to express something very aesthetically beautiful. He starts to underpromote his pawns to knights. So what can he do with the knight, or the horsepower should we call it, against the engine? Will horsepower beat modern engine technology? So he's got 3 knights at the moment, and he arranges his knights on the back row for his pawns to make progress forward, and they come down the board here, and he's ready to get some more knights now pretty soon. There's another one. That goes back to the second rank for the moment, now to the first rank. So the 4 knights are in waiting. They start to come back a bit to stop the king escaping from the top left of the board. And now we have one more pawn to underpromote to a knight. Now the knights are ready to coordinate for a final checkmate. And you will never see this kind of position in normal games, but here's the final checkmate. So Nakamura is making an impression in the field of human versus computer chess in Blitz, and this is a striking one, where clearly horsepower has overwhelmed engine technology. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.